It was just another ordinary day for Mark, a janitor at one of the city's most prestigious office buildings. He had been working here for several years, sweeping floors, taking out the trash, and keeping the place clean for the hundreds of busy professionals who worked in the towering skyscraper. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave him a stable life for his young daughter, Lily. Mark was a single dad, and life wasn't always easy. His wife had passed away several years ago, and since then he had been raising Lily on his own. She was only 8, but already she was sharp and full of curiosity. Every day after school, his mother would pick her up and bring her to the office, where she would wait for Mark to finish his shift. They would go out for dinner, chat about her day, or just spend some quiet time together. To Mark, these moments were precious. He had learned to cherish every second with her because he knew how fragile life could be. That particular day, the weather was beautiful, and Lily had been in a good mood, her smile wide as she skipped alongside her father through the office lobby. Mark's shift was almost over, and the two of them were heading toward the elevators to go up to the small break room where they always had their little snack before leaving for the evening. Mark had always liked the routine. It made everything feel normal, safe. But as they walked toward the elevator, something caught Mark's eye. A black car was parked unusually close to the entrance of the building. It was odd because cars weren't allowed to park there. That area was meant for quick loading and unloading, not for parking. Mark frowned as he glanced at the car. It wasn't a typical vehicle you'd see parked outside of an office building. It had dark windows and he couldn't see the driver or passengers inside. But the most unsettling part was how close it was parked, as if someone was trying to hide it from view. He felt a strange unease in his stomach but brushed it off, thinking it was probably just a mistake. As Mark and Lily continued walking, they talked about her day at school. She had made a new friend, and Mark couldn't help but feel proud of how well she was adjusting to life without her mother. They got to the elevators, and as Mark pressed the button, he looked back at the black car once more. That's when he noticed something strange. The car's engine had started. It was a soft sound, almost like the car had been idling quietly, waiting. Mark hesitated, but it was only for a moment. After all, this was a busy part of town, and it wasn't unusual for people to be in a rush. But as the elevator door opened, he heard something that made his heart skip a beat. A voice, calm and inviting, called out from behind them. "Hey, there, little one. You want a ride?" It was a man's voice, deep but strangely smooth. Mark froze, his heart thumping in his chest. Lily, who had been looking up at her father with her bright, innocent eyes, turned around, curious. Mark immediately stepped forward, blocking her from view of the black car. His protective instincts kicked in without a second thought. His hand moved to Lily's shoulder as he said firmly, "Don't get in the car." Lily looked at her father, confused but trusted him. She had always trusted him. Mark turned around to face the stranger, his pulse quickening. The man was stepping out of the black car, looking friendly but too calm. There was something off about his appearance. The way he was dressed, too clean-cut, too polished, like he didn't belong in this part of town. His suit was expensive, but that didn't matter. Mark wasn't interested in expensive suits. He was interested in protecting his daughter. "Who are you?" Mark asked, his voice sharp. The man smiled, but there was something unsettling about it. It was the kind of smile you'd give to a child if you wanted to make them feel at ease. But Mark didn't trust it for a second. "I'm just a friend. Your daughter has been chosen for something special. We're offering her a scholarship to a summer camp," the man said, his voice dripping with sweetness. Mark's heart skipped a beat. A scholarship? For Lily? His first reaction was confusion and then anger. Why hadn't anyone contacted him about this? Why was this man trying to take his daughter? His eyes narrowed, and he stepped forward, shielding Lily from the stranger's view. "You stay away from my daughter," Mark said, his voice low but full of warning. The man paused for a moment, his friendly demeanor faltering. There was a flash of frustration in his eyes, but it quickly vanished as he regained his composure. "I'm just trying to help," he said, his voice still calm, but there was an edge to it now. "We've been selected to offer her a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It's a great chance for her future." Mark didn't buy it. He felt a knot in his stomach. This wasn't just some nice gesture. Something wasn't right. I don't care what your offer is. I don't know who you are, and I'm not letting you take my daughter anywhere. The stranger hesitated for a second, clearly annoyed, but then he glanced back at the car as if considering something. The atmosphere felt tense, as if everything had come to a standstill. Mark's mind raced, but he remained calm on the outside. His daughter's safety was all that mattered. His protective instinct had kicked in, and there was no turning back. Look, I think there's been a mistake, the man finally said, taking a step back. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm just doing my job. But Mark wasn't convinced. Before Mark could say another word, a familiar voice rang out from behind him. What's going on here? Mark turned, surprised to see a familiar face walking toward them. The CEO of the company, Ryan Blake. He was tall, with a commanding presence, wearing an expensive suit and carrying the air of someone who was used to being in control. Mark didn't expect to see him here. Most of the time, he only heard about Ryan Blake in passing. The CEO never mingled with the janitorial staff. But today was different. Ryan Blake approached them and looked at Mark, then at the man who had been standing next to the car. Is there a problem? He asked, his tone calm but authoritative. Mark was still on edge, but now he could see the man's true identity. The CEO of the company had arrived. Something in Mark's gut told him to be cautious. But what happened next left everyone speechless. This expansion of Part 1 focuses on setting the scene with Mark's protective instincts and introduces tension with the strange man and the CEO. It captures the build-up to the crucial moment. Let me know if you'd like to continue with the next parts or need further adjustments. Ryan Blake, the CEO of the company, walked closer, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. Mark stood rigid, still blocking the path between the stranger and his daughter. He could feel his heart racing, but he remained focused. This was his daughter's safety at stake. He would not back down. Ryan Blake's eyes scanned the situation. He saw the tension between Mark and the stranger. His gaze then moved to Lily, who stood by her father, her small hand gripping his jacket tightly. Blake could tell that something wasn't quite right, and he wasn't about to let a situation like this escalate in his building. Mark, what's going on? Ryan asked, his voice calm but firm. He had dealt with business matters for years, but this was different. He was used to handling negotiations, but this was a father protecting his child, and that changed everything. Mark's protective instincts were on full alert, but now he had the CEO standing right there. Still, he wasn't about to let anyone get past him. He turned to face Blake, his voice tight with anger but under control. This man, he's trying to get my daughter into his car. He says he's offering her a scholarship or something, but I don't trust him. I don't know who he is or why he's trying to take her away from me. Ryan's expression softened as he looked back at the stranger. The man in the suit, who had been trying to get Lily into the car, was now standing silently, waiting for the CEO's next move. Ryan turned his attention back to Mark and nodded slowly, as if considering his words carefully. The man who had approached them seemed to be shifting uncomfortably. Mark noticed the sudden hesitation in his movements. This was no longer a smooth-talking stranger trying to impress a young girl. This was someone who had to explain himself to someone who wouldn't be easily swayed. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Ryan said, glancing back at the stranger. I'm Ryan Blake, CEO of this company. What's your name, and what exactly is going on here? The stranger hesitated for a moment before answering, clearly unsure of how to approach the situation. My name is Ethan Wells. I work with the company's outreach program. We offer a few opportunities for students, and Lily was one of the ones selected for a special scholarship. It's for a summer camp that helps kids develop leadership skills. Ryan raised an eyebrow but said nothing for a moment. Mark, still standing between the stranger and his daughter, kept his arms crossed. He wasn't buying it. So you're saying you were going to just take my daughter into a car and drive her to a camp, without consulting me first? Ethan shifted uncomfortably, and that small movement didn't go unnoticed by Mark. It was almost like the man was trying to find the right words to say to make it all sound reasonable, but nothing about this situation felt right to Mark. "Look," Ethan said, his voice quieter now. "I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just wanted to surprise Lily with the news. She's been selected for something that could change her life. I should have communicated better, but this was meant to be a good thing." Ryan took a step forward, his demeanor still calm, but there was a clear authority in his voice now. "Ethan, you're right, this could be a good thing. But you don't just show up and try to pull a child into a car without any notice. That's not how we handle things here, especially not with someone's daughter. You should have contacted the parents first. You can't just approach a child like that." Mark, still tense but now feeling a little more at ease, listened to the CEO's words. Blake wasn't trying to intimidate the stranger. He was just pointing out the obvious flaw in Ethan's approach. Still, Mark wasn't fully ready to let down his guard. "Who authorized this program, Ethan?" Ryan asked, his voice now more direct. Ethan paused for a long moment. He seemed to weigh the question in his mind, then nodded slowly. "It was an initiative led by the company's philanthropic arm. The summer camp scholarships are a part of our community outreach, meant to help children from underprivileged backgrounds." Ryan's eyes narrowed, his mind clearly working through the details. He glanced at Mark, who still stood protectively, in front of Lily. For a moment, Ryan seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. A simple mistake, a lack of communication, could have caused a major misunderstanding. And the last thing anyone wanted was for something like this to spiral out of control. "I understand now," Ryan said after a brief silence. He turned to Ethan and added, "But next time, you need to make sure you follow proper protocol. No one should ever approach a child in this way, especially without the parents' consent. That's not how we do things. You'll be reporting to me about this situation after hours. Understood?" Ethan nodded, clearly embarrassed. "Yes, of course, Mr. Blake, I'm really sorry. I didn't think it would be a problem, but I see now how it could have been." He looked at Mark, a small but sincere apology on his face. "I truly didn't mean to upset you or make you feel uncomfortable. I should have spoken to you first." Mark, still a little shaken but feeling slightly reassured, nodded. "It's not just about communication, though. I'm just looking out for my daughter. You can't trust everyone." Ryan looked at Mark and then back at Ethan. "Mark's right," he said. "And that's something you'll need to keep in mind moving forward. Parents have the right to protect their children, and that's a line we can't cross." The tension in the air slowly started to fade, but there was still a lingering unease. Ryan glanced at Lily, who was still holding her father's hand, clearly unsure of the situation, but trusting her father completely. Ryan smiled at her, the warmth returning to his expression. "Hey, Lily," he said, crouching down to her level. "How about this? I know we've had a little misunderstanding, but how would you like to be part of something great? Your dad and I will talk, and we'll make sure you're properly involved. In something special, but no surprise rides, okay?" Lily looked at her father and then nodded shyly. "Okay," she whispered, a small smile tugging at her lips. Mark felt a weight lift from his chest as he looked at his daughter. She was okay. She was safe, and that's all that mattered. Ryan stood back up, straightening his jacket. "I'm sorry again for this," he said, turning to Mark. "It was a mistake, and I'll make sure this is handled properly. You have every right to protect your family." Mark nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. "Thank you, Mr. Blake, I appreciate that." As Ryan turned to walk away, Mark looked down at his daughter, who was now more relaxed. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze and said softly, "Let's go home, sweetheart." And with that, they turned and walked out of the building together, the chaos behind them slowly fading as they stepped into the quiet of the evening. In part 2, the misunderstanding begins to unfold as Mark confronts the stranger, and Ryan Blake, the CEO, intervenes. This part develops the tension and brings resolution through Ryan's leadership and understanding, emphasizing Mark's protective instincts. Let me know if you'd like to expand or adjust any part further. The following day, the situation from yesterday still lingered in Mark's mind. He couldn't help but replay the events over and over, wondering if there was more to the story than just a simple misunderstanding. His instincts had screamed at him to protect Lily, and he had trusted them. But he also couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in the way he viewed everything around him, especially after the encounter with Ryan Blake, the CEO. Mark had always known the building, its people, and the company as distant and out of reach. After all, he was just the janitor. He cleaned the floors, emptied the trash, and made sure the office was spotless for the professionals who worked there. It was a quiet, often thankless job, but it was enough to take care of Lily. And despite not ever thinking about it much, it was enough to give him pride. But yesterday had changed things. Now he found himself questioning everything. The CEO, Ryan Blake, wasn't just a figurehead, a name he heard in passing. He was a person who had spoken to him, who had acknowledged his concerns, and who had apologized for what had happened. Still, Mark wasn't sure what to make of it. As he arrived at work the next day, pushing open the familiar double doors to the lobby, he noticed something different. There was a tension in the air. The cleaning supplies in his cart seemed to rattle a little louder. The floors were a little quieter than usual, and even the way the air smelled felt different. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but something had changed. Mark walked past the front desk, offering his usual polite nod to Karen, the receptionist, who smiled and waved back at him. He returned to his usual routine, cleaning the bathrooms and dusting off desks as he went. Still, his thoughts kept drifting back to the events of the previous day. What had really happened with that man, Ethan? Why was he so eager to take Lily away? And why hadn't anyone told Mark about the scholarship in advance? As he cleaned the break room, he couldn't help but overhear a conversation between a few employees. They were standing by the coffee machine, talking in hushed tones, and Mark did his best to stay out of earshot, focusing on wiping down the counter. But as one of them laughed, the mention of yesterday's incident caught his attention. "Did you hear about the janitor yesterday?" one of the women said. "Apparently, he went all protective dad on some CEO's outreach guy. He stopped him from taking the little girl. Can you imagine?" Mark's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't used to hearing about himself in the office, especially not like this. It wasn't a usual topic of conversation, but the way she said it wasn't mocking or disrespectful. It was more like she was impressed. The other woman nodded, looking over her shoulder as if to make sure no one else was listening. "Yeah, I heard that Blake himself got involved. The CEO, I mean. He actually apologized to the janitor," she said, her voice dropping. "Apparently this whole scholarship thing was a mix-up, and Ryan Blake actually praised him for looking out for his daughter. The janitor was pretty much a hero." Mark didn't know whether to feel proud or embarrassed. Hero? He was just doing what any parent would do in that situation. But hearing it from someone else, someone who worked in the building, made it feel different. It made him realize that what he did had caught more attention than he ever imagined. The conversation ended quickly as the two women returned to their work, leaving Mark alone with his thoughts. The words kept repeating in his mind. The janitor was pretty much a hero. He never thought of himself that way. He was just Mark, a father doing his best. But in that moment, he couldn't deny the pride he felt swelling inside him. Maybe he had done the right thing after all. Later that afternoon, when Mark was cleaning the main hallway near the elevators, he saw Ryan Blake again. This time the CEO was in a hurry, walking with a group of people. But when he spotted Mark, he stopped in his tracks and turned toward him. Mark's stomach tightened. He hadn't expected to see Blake so soon, and he definitely hadn't expected the man to approach him directly. Ryan smiled warmly, the same calm confidence he had displayed the day before. "Mark," he said, nodding his head. "I wanted to thank you again for what you did yesterday. You were right to be cautious. I've spoken to Ethan, and we've made sure everything is handled correctly now." Mark was taken aback. He hadn't expected this kind of acknowledgement. He had imagined that the CEO would just move on, forget about the incident, and let it all slide. But here he was, speaking to Mark like a peer. I didn't mean to cause a scene, Mr. Blake," Mark said, feeling a bit self-conscious. "I just wanted to make sure my daughter was safe, that's all." Ryan chuckled softly. "And that's exactly what a parent should do," he said, placing a hand on Mark's shoulder. You did the right thing, and I'm glad you stood your ground. Not everyone would have. Most people would have just let the man take the girl and not think twice. But you put your family first." Mark nodded, a bit unsure of how to respond. He wasn't used to compliments, especially not from someone as important as the CEO of the company. But Ryan wasn't just some untouchable figure. He seemed genuine, and for the first time, Mark started to see him as more than just a boss. "Listen," Ryan continued, his tone serious now. "I know you've been working here for years. You're a hard worker, and I see how much you care about your daughter. I want you to know that your efforts don't go unnoticed. I'd like to discuss something with you later, if you're open to it. It's about your role here." Mark was stunned. "My role?" Ryan nodded. "You've shown integrity, something I value in this company. I think it's time we talk about the future. We need people like you who know what matters." Before Mark could say anything, Ryan walked away, leaving him standing there, feeling both confused and elated. Was this really happening? Was the CEO offering him something more? Could this be the change Mark had been waiting for all these years? Or was it just a passing conversation? Mark didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. Things had changed. He had done what any parent would do to protect their child, but in doing so, he had unknowingly crossed paths with someone who saw him for more than just a janitor. As he finished his shift that day, Mark couldn't stop thinking about the conversation with Ryan. His role in the company might have been humble, but it seemed like that was about to change. Whether he was ready for it or not, this could be the beginning of something new. All he had to do was wait and see. In Part 3, Mark reflects on the events of the previous day, processing how his actions have caught the attention of others, especially the CEO. The tension from the incident begins to subside and new possibilities start to open up for Mark. Let me know if you'd like to continue or adjust any part further. The next few days passed in a blur for Mark. After his brief conversation with Ryan Blake, the CEO, he felt a mix of emotions. He was still processing everything that had happened, how one moment of protection for his daughter had turned into something much bigger than he could have ever imagined. As he pushed the cleaning cart through the familiar hallways of the office building, he couldn't help but notice the subtle shifts in how people treated him. It wasn't that anyone was openly rude or dismissive. Quite the opposite. Some employees whom he barely knew smiled and nodded at him. Others, like Karen at the front desk, greeted him by name and asked how his day was going. Even a few of the managers who had passed him without a second glance in the past now offered polite greetings. Mark felt a little awkward. He wasn't used to this kind of attention, especially not from people who worked on the higher floors of the building, where the offices were pristine and filled with people wearing expensive suits. Yet, as Mark walked through the polished hallways, he couldn't shake the thought that something was different. The way people looked at him had changed, and it wasn't just because of what had happened with Lily. There was a deeper understanding now, one that hadn't existed before. It was almost as if he was seen, not just as a janitor, but as a person. A father, a man who had a sense of dignity and purpose. For the first time in a long while, Mark felt like he wasn't invisible. He was cleaning the break room when his phone buzzed in his pocket. Surprised, Mark pulled it out to check the message. It was from Ryan Blake. The message was short but direct. "Mark, I'd like to meet with you. Please come to my office around 3 p.m. today. I have something important to discuss." Mark's heart skipped a beat. A meeting with the CEO? His first instinct was to ignore the message. Maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe someone else was supposed to meet with him instead. But then he remembered the conversation they'd had just days ago. Ryan had said something about discussing his role in the company. That wasn't a casual remark. It wasn't like the CEO to waste time with someone like him without reason. His mind raced as he finished up his work for the day. What did Ryan want to talk about? Was this about the scholarship incident, or was it something else? Mark wasn't sure what to expect, but there was no turning back now. He glanced at the clock. There was still an hour left before the meeting. His stomach twisted in knots as he wondered if he was ready for whatever was coming next. At 3 p.m. sharp, Mark arrived at Ryan Blake's office. The receptionist, Jennifer, who usually looked at him with a mix of indifference and mild curiosity, greeted him with a warm smile. "Mr. Blake is expecting you," she said kindly, ushering him toward the large wooden door at the end of the hallway. Mark took a deep breath and knocked lightly. He was still unsure what to expect, but he couldn't turn back now. The door creaked open and he stepped inside. Ryan Blake was sitting behind his large mahogany desk, a stack of papers neatly arranged in front of him. The office was grand, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of the city skyline. Mark had only ever seen offices like this in movies. But now here he was, standing in front of it. Ryan stood up from behind his desk and smiled, gesturing to a chair across from him. "Mark, please have a seat," he said, his tone friendly and genuine. Mark sat down slowly, feeling out of place, but trying not to show it. Ryan took his time before speaking, as if carefully choosing his words. "I want to start by saying thank you again for what you did for your daughter," Ryan began. "You acted with courage and instinct, and that's something I deeply respect. Most people would have been too afraid to step up in the way you did, but you didn't hesitate to protect her, and that speaks volumes about the kind of person you are." Mark felt a wave of humility wash over him. He wasn't used to compliments, especially from someone like Ryan Blake. "I was just doing what any parent would do," Mark replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Ryan nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "Exactly. But you're more than just a parent, Mark. You're someone who values integrity. You did what was right even when it was uncomfortable, and that's rare these days. Most people just go with the flow. But not you." Mark shifted in his seat, unsure of where this conversation was going. "I appreciate what you're saying, Mr. Blake, but I still don't understand why you wanted to meet with me." Ryan smiled again, leaning forward slightly. "That's exactly why I asked you to meet with me. I think you're someone who could do more than just cleaning up after others. You've shown that you have the skills, the intelligence, and the character to be in a different position here. I want to offer you an opportunity, Mark, a chance to take on a new role. I'm not talking about a promotion in the traditional sense, but a chance to get more involved with the company's outreach programs. You'll be working directly with people, coordinating community efforts, and helping to make a difference. I want you to be part of something bigger." Mark's eyes widened in disbelief. Was this really happening? Was the CEO really offering him a chance to do something different, something more significant? He had always felt like he was on the outside looking in, but now it seemed like there was an actual path in front of him. "You're offering me a new role?" Mark asked, his voice tinged with hesitation. Ryan nodded. "Yes. I've been watching you for a while, Mark, and I believe you could bring something valuable to the team. You understand people, you care about your community, and you have a deep sense of responsibility. That's exactly the kind of person we need. You've been working here for a long time, and you know the building, the people, and the culture better than most. I think you're ready for more." Mark was speechless. He never thought he would hear words like this coming from someone like Ryan Blake. He had been just a janitor, cleaning the floors of the building, and now he was being asked to take on a role that could change his life. He could hardly believe it. "I don't know what to say," Mark said quietly. "This is a big change. I've never really thought about moving up. I've always just done my job, you know?" Ryan smiled warmly. "I understand, but sometimes the right opportunity comes at the right time. I think this could be that opportunity for you. Think about it, Mark. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. You've already shown that you can handle responsibility. Now, it's time to take the next step." Mark felt his chest tighten with emotion. This was the moment he had never expected, and yet here it was, right in front of him. He didn't know what the future held, but he could feel a new path opening up. "Thank you," Mark said, his voice thick with gratitude. "I'll think about it. I really will." Ryan stood up and extended his hand. "Take all the time you need, but I hope you'll say yes. You're the kind of person we need here." Mark shook Ryan's hand, his mind racing with possibilities. As he left the office that day, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. He had started this journey as a janitor, just doing his job. But now he was being offered a chance to make a real impact. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one that he had never imagined but was now determined to embrace. In Part 4, Mark is offered an unexpected opportunity by Ryan Blake, the CEO. The conversation becomes a turning point in Mark's life as he contemplates a major change in his career. This part focuses on Mark's internal struggle and the new direction that his life could take. Let me know if you'd like to adjust anything or continue with Part 5. The next few days were a whirlwind for Mark. After his conversation with Ryan Blake, the CEO, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change in ways he had never imagined. The offer to take on a new role with the company was overwhelming, but it also filled him with a sense of hope. For the first time in a long time, he felt like someone truly believed in him, someone with power and influence. It was an opportunity he never thought he'd be given, and now as he walked the familiar halls of the office building once again, the weight of that decision pressed heavily on his shoulders. Mark didn't talk much to anyone about the offer right away. It wasn't that he didn't trust his coworkers. It was more that he didn't quite know how to process what was happening. He had always been the guy who cleaned the floors, took out the trash, and stayed out of the way. He never expected anything more than that. But now, here he was, being asked to step into a new world, one that was filled with potential, but also uncertainty. He spent the next few days thinking it over. Every evening after finishing his shift and putting Lily to bed, he'd sit at the small kitchen table in his apartment, running over the details in his mind. The offer from Ryan Blake seemed too good to be true. He had spent his entire life in the background, keeping things clean and running smoothly for others. It was hard for him to picture himself in a leadership role, working alongside people who had years of education and experience. Could he really do this? Was he ready for something so big? But then he thought about Lily. He thought about the life he wanted to give her, the kind of future he wanted her to have. He couldn't deny that this opportunity was a chance to make things better, not just for himself but for her as well. She deserved more than the simple, small life they had. He wanted her to have choices, to have opportunities, to see the world beyond the confines of their modest apartment. And maybe, just maybe, this was the way to do it. One evening, as Mark sat on the couch, staring out the window at the city, below he heard a knock at the door. It was the familiar sound of his neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly woman who lived next door. She had been a comforting presence for Mark since he moved into the building. She was always there to offer a cup of tea or a kind word, and he appreciated her more than he could say. "Mark, dear," Mrs. Jenkins called softly from the other side of the door. "I brought you some soup. I thought you might like a little something warm after your long day." Mark smiled and opened the door. "Thanks, Mrs. Jenkins. You didn't have to do that, but I really appreciate it." She handed him the small container of soup and looked up at him with a knowing smile. "You've been quiet lately," she said. "Something on your mind?" Mark hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to explain everything that had been happening. But then he realized that Mrs. Jenkins had always been a good listener. She had seen him at his best and his worst, and she never judged. Maybe now was the time to talk. "Actually, yeah," Mark said, sitting down at the table with the soup in front of him. "I've been offered a new job with the company. Ryan Blake, the CEO, wants me to help with some of the outreach programs. It's a big step, and I'm not sure if I'm ready for it. I've spent my whole life just cleaning, but now things feel different. I feel like this is my chance to do something bigger. I just don't know if I'm up for it." Mrs. Jenkins sat down across from him, her eyes thoughtful. "Mark, I've known you for a long time, and if there's one thing I know about you, it's that you're a man of integrity. You've always done the right thing, no matter how small or big the task was. If you take this chance, I have no doubt you'll rise to the occasion. You've got the heart for it, and that's what matters most." Her words hit Mark deeply. He had always respected Mrs. Jenkins' wisdom, and hearing her speak with such confidence gave him a sense of reassurance. "You really think I can do this?" "I don't just think it, Mark. I know it," she said, giving him a warm smile. You've got the courage to take on something new, and you've got the heart to make it work. Don't let fear hold you. Back from an opportunity that could change your life and your daughter's. Her words stuck with him long after she had left. The idea that he was more than just a janitor, that he could actually make a difference, was starting to feel less like a dream and more like a possibility. Maybe it wasn't so crazy after all. Maybe, just maybe, he was ready. The following day, Mark arrived at work with a new sense of purpose. His heart was still racing with nerves, but the excitement was beginning to overshadow the fear. He had made up his mind. He would take the job. He would take the chance to create a future for himself and Lily that he never thought was possible. When he arrived at Ryan Blake's office, he found the CEO waiting for him with a smile. Ryan rose from his desk and extended his hand. "Mark, I'm glad to see you again. I've been looking forward to hearing your decision." Mark took a deep breath. "I've thought about it a lot, Mr. Blake, and I've decided I'm in. I want to take the job. I want to make a difference, not just for myself, but for my daughter. I'm ready for the challenge." Ryan's face lit up with a smile of approval. "I'm glad to hear that, Mark. I knew you had it in you. You're going to do great things, I'm sure of it." Mark's heart swelled with pride. He had done it. He had taken the first step toward something new, something bigger. As he walked out of the office that day, a sense of excitement and possibility filled the air. He wasn't just a janitor anymore. He was someone who could make a difference. He was someone who had a future. And when he got home that evening, he shared the news with Lily, who jumped up and down with excitement. She had always believed in him, even when he doubted himself. Now they both had something to look forward to. Mark didn't know what the future would hold, but he knew one thing for sure. He had taken control of his life. He had embraced the unknown, and he was ready to face whatever came next. With Lily by his side, there was nothing he couldn't do. In part 5, Mark finally makes the decision to take the offer from Ryan Blake, realizing that the opportunity is not just about a job, but about creating a better life for himself and his daughter. This part concludes Mark's journey of self-discovery and growth, showing that sometimes taking a chance can lead to life-changing results. Let me know if you'd like to refine anything or continue with additional insights.